AP is reporting last night that in March of 2019, the president was briefed in the president's daily briefing about this attempt by the Russian intelligence services to use Taliban-linked militants to kill American troops. The president, the White House have nowhere to go from the corner they've painted themselves in. They said pointedly and clearly and flatly that the president was not briefed on this. You can believe the president, you can believe the White House press secretary, you can take the body of evidence of what they've told us over 3.5 years, or you can believe the intelligence people who are telling the Associated Press and the New York Times and the Washington Post and NBC News about what actually happened and that the president was briefed. Admiral Stavridis, I would go to you on this. The director of national intelligence had a chance yesterday to shoot this down. Gina Haspel, the director of the CIA, had a chance to shoot this down. But in their statements, they went after the dangers of leaking and not on the actual news. Did this happen? Did these briefings take place? And was the president aware of this since at least March of this year, or perhaps, as the Associated Press reports, March of 2019? They did not dispute that. They talked about leaks. What is your assessment of all we've seen through media reports and these statements from members of the intelligence community?
Well, Willie, going back to the 4 years I was in charge of that mission in Afghanistan, that's a NATO mission, of course, 150,000 troops. We had many opportunities to see different groups come in and try and move the needle on violence. And during those years, I would see the presidential daily brief. So I can tell you for a fact that a report like this would go up like a rocket to the very top, to the White House. There's just no doubt in my mind that the president would have been made aware of this, whether it was in written form or briefed to him personally or pulled aside. There just can't be any question about it. And what's really shocking here is the lack of a response, which, as you point on, may have come as long ago as 2019. But even if it was happening in 2020, it's unconscionable that this would not be front and center for the president, that he would be talking to his team and looking at the military, economic, diplomatic, all of the options we would have to respond to the Russian Federation. This is really shocking to me.
Yeah, you know, it is so shocking. And Mika, let's forget about what the president has not done since March of 2020. And if the AP's right, just let's move to the side what the president has refused to do since 2019. Yeah. Think about this, that Americans found out this weekend that Vladimir Putin is paying to put bounties on the heads of American troops. All the intel agencies have this information. The National Security Council had a briefing on this. And of course, Grenell and all these other stooges, first of all, they started by lying about it, saying, oh, no, nobody knew about that. That's a total lie. But we're not surprised that they're lying. But think about this. And I know when this came out, we were talking offline about what a terrible position this puts a man who is beholden to Vladimir Putin in. And we were talking about right after it broke, oh, my God. He's going to deny it. He's going to lie about it. But then he's going to refuse to do what any other president would do to Vladimir Putin. He won't. And so what has Donald Trump done? Instead of criticizing Putin, a man that he is beholden to for reasons that perhaps we will find out one day, he has remained silent. Instead of defending American troops and pushing back on Russia and pushing back on Putin, who has he pushed back on? The intelligence agencies, America's men and women who are gathering this information. So once again, he chooses an ex-KGB chief over U.S. professionals in the intelligence agency who are working to try to get information to Washington, D.C. that will save American troops.
And he says a good relationship with Russia is a good thing.
Yeah, well,
he's been supportive.
And he says he's his friend, but
of Putin.
Again, so just think it. But again, since this has come out, no condemnations from Donald Trump
Nothing.
towards Vladimir Putin. And it's not even a surprise because he's beholden, even when American lives are in danger.
The Washington Post's David Ignatius has new reporting and new questions this morning in his latest column entitled Were Trump's aides too afraid to tell him about the Russian bounties? He asks that question. Can you imagine? Through this January and February, as the CIA and military surveillance gathered reports about a cash stockpile in northern Afghanistan and other indicators of a possible Russian operation, U.S. military and intelligence officials became increasingly concerned, several told me. By March, they were pressing for a top-level review by senior Trump administration officials of this still unconfirmed threat to U.S. soldiers. Through this agonizing period, Trump kept a buzz of happy talk about improving relations with Putin, including the possibility of inviting him back into the Group of Seven. Were Trump's commanders too afraid to warn him of this folly? Trump isn't the only one who knows too little about Afghanistan. Our forces there are so hunkered down, I'm told the military hasn't allowed any significant embeds by journalists. Trump is an obstacle to good policy. Either people don't tell him the truth or he doesn't want to hear it. Whichever way, he's defaulting on his most basic responsibility as commander-in-chief.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.